Don't give away the premise before the spoiler warning. Don't give away the premise before the spoiler warning. Don't give away the premise before the spoiler warning. This is a review of Spock Amok, the 5th episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. If you haven't seen the episode yet, take heed. Spoilers lie ahead. It's a body swap episode. I should have seen this coming. This first season of Strange New Worlds has seen the show checking off classic Star Trek premises. We've had the First Contact episode, the Outbreak episode, the Submarine episode, and now the Freaky Friday episode. And it's reasonably well done, too, mainly because the writers are smart enough not to depend on the body swap plot, which is a very fun but also extremely well-worn premise to carry the whole episode. We see Spock and his fiancée T'Pring accidentally switch bodies, and that leads to some interesting and entertaining places, but we also have lots of other stuff going on. The two main other plots involve Captain Pike conducting diplomatic negotiations with some difficult but strategically important aliens, and Number One and Lieutenant Noonien Singh playing Enterprise bingo, and there's a few bits with Nurse Chapel and Lieutenant Ortega sprinkled in to fill the gaps. Pike's story intersects with Spock's and is mostly played straight and leads to a nice payoff at the end. Number One and La'an's plot is pure comedy and is even funnier than the Spock T'Pring body swap, but the body swap is the main story, so let me start with that. I like how, following the swap, once Spock and T'Pring realize what's happened, first they try immediately, though unsuccessfully, to reverse it. Logical. And then they tease keeping it a secret before breaking down and telling Captain Pike, who has appeared to collect Spock for more diplomatic talks. If this episode were written as a traditional farce, Spock and T'Pring would have kept the body swap from Pike because a farce runs on secrets and misunderstandings and false assumptions, not logic. But telling Pike not only makes sense in terms of realism, why wouldn't they tell someone what happened? It also works for the story. It creates the opportunity for Pike to step up during the negotiations when things start to get a little difficult. For Spock, really, T'Pring, and defend Spock's dedication to Starfleet and celebrate what he symbolizes to the Federation, not only to the aliens with whom they are negotiating, but also to T'Pring, who Pike knows is in there, behind Spock's face. It also gives us the wonderful moment when Spock and T'Pring tell Pike what's happened. I love his reaction, one of surprise and amusement, but not disbelief, because why wouldn't he believe that his science officer and his fiancée have accidentally swapped bodies? They live in a Star Trek show. That kind of shit happens all the time. As far as the body swap itself, beyond the inherent silliness of the concept, it's played relatively straight. Most of the laughs, and there are a few, come from the performances of Ethan Peck and Gia Sandhu. Peck especially does maybe his best work yet. Not only does he play Spock and T'Pring as Spock in a dream sequence at the start of the episode, he also plays a fully human Spock and a fully Vulcan Spock, both of whom are clearly different than the Spock we typically see. It highlights not only his ability to bring out subtleties within the character, but also how much work he's doing when he plays Spock normally. There's a lot more to his performance than lowering his voice and speaking calmly. And if you didn't get that before, you should certainly recognize it after watching this episode. For her part, Gia Sandhu does a good job channeling Ethan Peck's Spock in her post-body swap performance. As T'Pring, she's always very confident, but Peck's Spock often has moments of uncertainty or hesitation, which are only amplified by the body swap, and Sandhu brings those into her scenes as Spock as T'Pring. It's a very good comedic performance. But as I said, the real top-shelf comedy in this episode comes from Number One and La'an. It starts when it's revealed that number one's nickname among the crew is Where Fun Goes to Die, owing to her preference for work over shore leave, which leads to number one admitting that she feels estranged from the crew due to her position as first officer, and leads to number one and Lon playing Enterprise Bingo after catching a pair of junior officers attempting to fill in one of that game's more elusive squares. We get a funny good cop, bad cop scene where number one plays against type as the sweet, supportive cop, while Lon effortlessly fills the role of bad cop. They punish the junior officers by assigning them to work with Chief Kyle, prompting one of them to complain, "But he's so mean," which is hilarious. I love the idea that small, pleasant, quiet Chief Kyle is apparently a tyrant, feared by the lower-ranking members of the crew. And after admitting to themselves that actually they've never heard of Enterprise Bingo, number one and Lon do some research and decide to play it for themselves. And that's fun. It's a fun show. Body swap isn't the only established Trek trope Strange New Worlds takes a swing at here. This is also its first attempt at a comedy episode. And while I wouldn't quite call it a home run, I think it's definitely a hit. Maybe a stand-up double. The biggest issue I have with it is that the setup takes almost half the episode. Once that protracted place setting is done, things really pick up, and it turns out to be a delightful and satisfying episode, but it really takes a while to get going. We get an early setup about the aliens being negotiated with, signifying a successful negotiation by flying the flag of their counterparts, which pays off in the end with their ship sailing away. Literally, it's a solar sail ship, flying the Federation flag. We get a clever and extremely Star Trek resolution to the diplomacy plot. The aliens value empathy and have mirrored the behavior of all their counterparts in past negotiations, arguing with Tellarites, deploying logical arguments with Vulcans, etc., which leads Pike to conclude that the best way to win them over is to take their side. So he does. He lists all the reasons why, from their perspective, they shouldn't want to ally with the Federation, and it works. The aliens go for it, the suckers. It's clever, and it lets us see Pike being awesome once again, and I can't get enough of that shit. Number one and Lon's scavenger hunt pays off with a neat visual too, as the last item on their list is signing the Scorch, the very thing the two junior officers were attempting to do when they were caught. The Scorch is the oldest unreplaced panel on the Enterprise's outer hull. We don't actually learn that until the end, when number one and Lon erect a force field, fill it with atmosphere, and take a stroll on the outside of the ship to sign the Scorch themselves, which they do. Number one signing not only her name, but also number one in a nice touch. We get all of that, plus some funny character bits with Chapel and Ortegas, who is apparently Chapel's regular wingman or wing woman, wing person, and Dr. Mbenga, who gets made fun of for his fishing hat, poor fellow. And we even get a little tease of Chapel developing feelings for Spock, which you serious Trekkies will recall is her one and only character trait in Star Trek, the original series. It's well done, but it's also a little jarring to see such an explicit connection made between this Chapel and herself from TOS, because even though they're meant to be the same person, they're so different, what with the Strange New Worlds version of Chapel having a personality and being a well-written character played by a decent actor and all that. And to those of you who are about to say, oh, that sounds an awful lot like a canon issue, Steve. I thought you didn't care about canon. I don't. That wasn't me having a canon issue. That was me reaching to take a cheap shot at Majel Barrett, because it never gets old to me and I never miss. She was fine as number one in the cage and as the computer voice, but that's it. I digress. This was a good episode. This was, in fact, the 5th consecutive good episode so far, and I hope I don't jinx the perfect game by acknowledging it, but I'm not superstitious, so I ain't going to let that stop me. Strange New Worlds is 5 for 5. the best beginning of any of the current crop of Trek shows, one of the best beginnings of any Trek series, period. 5 rock-solid episodes, including the one last week, which is a contender for an all-time classic right out of the gate. There are only 10 episodes in this season, which means they only need one more good one to finish above 500. I know that's the desperate, dead-inside Baltimore Orioles fan in me talking, but even so, I think our chances are pretty good. As Star Trek fans, I mean, the Orioles are fucked this year. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you want to support my channel, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or become a channel member by clicking the join button, or make a one-time gift via PayPal or Venmo or the super thanks button below the video. Links to all of those are in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for a review of episode 6.